Hey everyone, hello and welcome to the last Fireside chat of this Game Fest. Here with me today is Lance James and Craig Ritchie. They are working and representing companies versus Evil and Drop Beer Bytes. Me again with you, Boris from Remote Control Productions. We are a family of game development studios working from Europe and mostly developing games, hundreds of them actually, throughout the history of the company. I would like to start with Lens. So the question is, how do you start in the industry? What's your story, and how do you come to be the main face of the Versus Evil?
Uh, so mine's people. Back in 1997, I actually played a game professionally called Age of Empires 2, and met lots of good friends and what have you. And I actually got out of the industry, out of esports altogether, and did a whole different life, a whole different career, and a whole different things for almost a decade. Then I stopped that and tried to decide what I wanted to do. And some of those friends I still had reached out and got me a job back in the industry as a community manager. And that was about actually, that was a long time ago now. That was 2011, I guess, 2010 when that happened. And I joined Versus Evil in 2013. So that's pretty much how it all happens. It was just knowing the right people and having the kind of mindset. And, obviously I enjoy video games. Still a big part of that is my life. And it's what I do, enjoy them, enjoy working with them. But that's kind of how I got in. Just had to have luckily new friends in the right places who got me in my foot in the door and kind of helped me get started again after I was out of the whole video game aspect and world for a long time.
Um, do you know it's the pretty catchy name Versus Evil? How did it came to be? Why the company is named that way?
So that was actually kind of Steve Escalante. He's our general manager. That's all his doing. And it came down to the fact that he was actually working for Bethesda at the time, and he was looking at, they get pitched a ton of games, and they were looking at things, and they were seeing stuff happening in the industry at the time. And, this was 15, 16, 17 years ago, and the industry was a very different place. And publishers had a very negative, bad kind of connotation. People saw publishers and thought bad things. So he thought it didn't have to be a bad relationship. It could be more of a partnership, and it could be much more of an open back and forth kind of relationship. And that was the whole idea of the versus evil, versus that evil mentality of a publisher. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. We could all be friends and do well together and work together and be partners. So that's kind of how the whole versus evil namesake came about. And it's still true how we operate today. We're very open, very blunt, and very, we try to think of ourselves more as partners with all of our developers.
I can just switch your mic for a second. So thank you, Lance. Craig, what is then your story? How did you end up in the industry and leading such a beautiful team?
Thanks. Yeah, look, my background is originally I was in journalism. So I was doing a whole bunch of writing for surfing magazines, video game magazines, tech magazines, that kind of thing. Mostly print. I mean, this was started in the late 90s, long before, most of the video gaming media world was online, long before websites were sort of had the place that they had today. And, as time went on, I was still writing for these outlets. I had to just naturally start doing a little bit of stuff online, writing for websites as well. Somebody had me managing their social media, and that kind of transitioned into a role doing digital marketing for NVIDIA, where I worked for them in the UK for a while. And then I was doing quite a bit of stuff with the GeForce brand as well. I was very keen to work in games because I'd always, as far back as the 80s, as far as back as I can remember, played and enjoyed games in, arcades and consoles at home, that kind of thing. And an opportunity came up to work for CCP Games, who do EVE Online. This was to work on Dust 514, which was a PlayStation title out of their Shanghai office. So it was, opportunity work in games, go to China for a while. Something really exciting. This was going on 10 years ago. So I think 2013 this happened. I worked for CCP for a while, and through a bunch of the different studios, bunch of the different products as well. Ultimately ending up in Australia, where we relocated almost 6 years ago, and did a bunch of more marketing, Kickstarter, just sort of lending my digital marketing and writing background and funding background to other indies, smaller studios, until somebody actually that I used to work for at CCP Games suggested, why don't you start your own studio? You've been doing this for a while now. Make your own game, give it a go. And that was almost 4 years ago. And yeah, so myself and a good friend, also from South Africa, we founded Droplet Bytes in January 2019. And hey, it's been a crazy ride, but here we are right now.
Yeah, so what you're making is your first game together. It's called Broken Roads, and it's set in the Australian post-apocalyptic setting, which I haven't seen that much since Mad Max, actually. Could you tell us a bit how you came up with this? Because as you both, the founding partners of the studio, as I understood it, not from Australia, so you were really charmed by what you saw there.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I mean, I moved over here and I was living here for about 2 years or so before the studio got founded. And originally, when we were starting off with Broken Roads, it was going to be a nondescript, kind of generic. You don't know where it is. We weren't going to say what country. It was just a post-apocalyptic journey, like an Oregon Trail through some post-apocalyptic world with heavy on the tactical combat. And as we dived more and more into the story that we wanted to have and the characters we wanted to have, just became apparent that, hey, why don't we set this in Australia? It's such a big and diverse and beautiful place that even in a post-apocalyptic world, you could have deserts, you could have destroyed cities, you could have dried up forests, you've got the colder places down south, you've got the tropical places in the east, you've got the really dry and hot places as well. Eventually we had to cut down the content because it's just too big a game, so we were like, okay, maybe just Western Australia. And then we dialed it down and go, okay, there's so much in Western Australia, we'll just do the wheat belt area of Western Australia. And as we kept developing the characters, developing the story, we realized, okay, we're moving further and further away from just a pure kind of, like I said, Oregon Trails, a lot of tactical combat, into a deeper, more story-driven role-playing game, which let us dive into this countryside and its people a whole lot more. Ended up going over to Western Australia, to parts of where the game is set, traveling around there for 2 separate trips with a bunch of people who are now on the team. Took well over 1,000 photographs, and actually using those as reference images for all of the locations that are in the game. So we went from a nondescript post-apoc to very, very specific towns, cities, locations, landmarks in real Western Australia.
Yeah, fantastic to bring such a real place to the game, especially as a small team. It's really high effort. So when you already start crystallizing the game, what was the point when you decided, okay, we're ready to start pitching, we're ready to start approach people? So when did you found Versus Evil? How long into this journey you already been?
So we were quite a few years in before we approached Versus Evil. We'd always had the plan, the game that we wanted to make, the scope that we were going for. We were never going to get there without additional funding. So we, myself and Jeff Nordia, my co-founder, we'd always planned that, what we're doing here is we're starting a business. Yes, it's creative and it's fun and it's games and so on, but we're going to operate this like a business, try to do this as professionally and properly as we can, have a look at with what can we do with the finances we've got, sort of the seed capital, friends and family, our own personal investment. Thankfully, we live in states in Australia where there's quite a bit of government funding. There is also a little bit of federal funding. So we had the plan. We were going to get, how far can we get a loan? What can we, as in just the two of us and the money we could raise together to get a demo together? what could we get in the way of state support, with the goal of coming out with a big announcement and a big presence at PAX Australia in 2019. And the first time we applied for government funding, we were actually unsuccessful. It was quite a knock because we were kind of really hoping we could use that for, say, building up the team or getting the demo together, that kind of thing. We had to scrape by. We did it. We finally got to PAX 2019 and got out there with the trailer and a hands-on demo and a presence at the event, and managed to get some really good coverage in, well, basically the global gaming press. We were on PC Gamer and Nintendo Life, and I think IGN, and just a whole bunch of spots that we really wanted to get out there. And that was part of the goal. Was we're going to come out there, we're going to sell a promise, we're going to build a brand well before there's a game underneath it. We're going to get those core elements of what we're trying to sell, and hopefully attract funding, whether it's partnerships with, say, first party, Microsoft or Sony, or ideally what we'd kind of planned the whole time was find a publisher like Versus Evil, and we actually ended up speaking to over 35 publishers along the way. And Versus Evil is one that I had my eyes on for a long time, because my favorite role-playing game of the last decade is Pillars of Eternity 2. It did a lot of things right as far as I was concerned, and I also really loved the Banner Saga, and I thought, well, here's a publisher that knows what we're going after and could really promote, sell, help us turn Broken Roads into the success we want it to be, but we can't without the support of a partner like them.
Yeah, that's really great that you ended up together after all this time and really reaching out to so many parties. But Lance, do you remember like the first time when you saw the project on your table, like the first pitch, the demo? What were your thoughts and impressions?
Yeah, the initial thought, and just kind of candidly, me being a Texan guy growing up with Crocodile Dundee and all of the very Americanized Australian impressions, was I had all those thoughts, right? There's shrimp on the Barbie and all that good stuff. Candidly, it was an RPG set in Australia. That was immediately my thought, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, I think that's kind of most people's, maybe my generation's impression of Australia. But seeing the game and seeing where, Craig and the whole Drop Bear Bytes guys wanted to go with the title, and kind of going after that more story-driven kind of micro story, even some of the side quest things, the path they wanted to go, more of the Disco Elysium style of narrative adventure and storytelling, and the depth of the post-apocalyptic Australian setting is something that really enticed all of Versus Evil. And then it certainly, just kind of selfishly, these are games we like to play, right? So it's certainly something that most of Versus Evil has a lot of experience with, but it's also things that we enjoy playing, just when we're not working. So it's kind of that twofold setting of, they've got this really cool idea and a really great setting, and they've already developed it to a point where this, it's clear they know what they're doing, what they want to do, and how they want to get there. B, it was a game that we just liked, right? It's a style of game we like. It's something we enjoy playing. This is a game that we would play if it was ever out there. I think the final bit was just us meeting with Craig and Jethro and the rest of the team, and just meeting the team, right? That to us, is with any game the team is a critical part of it. And that's something where we felt Drop Bear Bytes, just regardless of the game, they're a great team and we want to work with them. So good people make good games. That's simply what we found. So good working relationship, good people, good talks, and obviously we went after it, tried to get a publishing deal, and thankfully it all worked out. Here we are.
Yeah, great to find ourselves in this place when everything already developing. But when it all started, you saw then the team having the great idea, great concept, already working through it. And Craig already mentioned funding as the one thing they needed. What else did Versus Evil bring to the table? What kind of expertise maybe you identified that you can cover and really ensure the success of a project?
Well, I don't want to take anything away from Bytes. They're certainly a very gifted and very talented development team. They've got a lot of great people working for them. Especially want to call out their art team, which since we've signed the deal with them has leveled up. Just they've polished, they've added more publicly. The stuff that hasn't been released publicly is amazing. It's literally a whole different scale up in terms of polish and detail and everything like that. So I'm really excited for that to be out there. I would say just in terms of helping Bytes, it's a lot of thinking ahead type of things, right? So I know Craig and most of the team, they're literally head down working on the game, right? So I think a lot of what Versus Evil is doing right now is thinking ahead, further ahead. How do we finish? How do we launch this title? Where are we launching this title? What other opportunities can we get when we do launch the title? It's kind of worrying about stuff that they don't have to, whether it's more marketing related or launch related or platform related or PR related or whatever. So there's a lot of that content or a lot of those headaches, I guess we'll say, that we're taking off their plate. I also like to think that we're also just helping them problem solve. That's one of the big things where I do like to think we step in, we do help opportunity wise. We get the opportunity to work with all the platforms and work with lots of games, lots of engines, lots of tools and what have you. And it's those things where, Craig may have a problem with something, we can go ask Unity or Unreal directly. It's like, we can just go ask and maybe get them an answer or get them a better support type of thing. But largely, I still want to give a lot of credit back to Bytes. It's them sticking to their plan and doing what they want to do and making it happen. It's just development process for any game is challenging. So the more help and the more opportunities you get, the more resources you get, the easier things are.
Thanks, Lance. Craig, what's then from your perspective as a developer, what are those, like we talked about, like material and non-material things that publisher can bring to the table? What you can highlight, what is like the biggest value for you in this partnership?
Sure. To not diminish the value of the services and the relationship, which I'll get to in a sec, what we knew we needed, which everyone needs, is the financing and the funding to complete the project of this scale, which has grown and increased. And like Lance said, we've invested more and more in the art team. I mean, the game originally started off with as a 2D. Well, it was tile based, basically the same as Shadowrun Returns. We had the same art team as Shadowrun Returns, and it was a 2D tile based kind of hand drawn world with 3D characters, because that was kind of the ceiling of what our budget could allow. We always had aspirations to do more, and then not forgetting about the fact everyone's got to eat, everyone's got to get food on their tables. You're always competing with the bigger studios or the more secure setup developers, that kind of thing you could lose your team to. So just being able to give people hey, we're not scraping by anymore. You don't have to like mow lawns to pay the rent while we're pitching to all these publishers. So getting that out the way was like the massive, okay, cool, now we can actually do this thing. Like, this is amazing. Like what's next from here? Well, this massive QA team, the fact that there are so many people now, it's not just my team pulling out of the zero-sum game of human hours that comes to hey, I can't have you developing a new feature right now, or composing new audio, or drawing a new character portrait. I need you to actually play the game because you need to be testing this. Versus Evil brings a whole QA team, as well as people to manage that QA team, localization, voiceover support, porting the game to all the different consoles, which we plan to do as well. So the publisher brings those kinds of services, and then not just, hey, we're doing this, but we're also managing that. Like, we're project managing that. We're handling the relationships. We've got people to do all the Jira boards. We will reach out to you and say, hey, it's time for more screenshots for Twitter. We'll get on Discord and keep the community stuff alive. And it's just like all of these hats that you get to take off that you've been wearing for like many years now. Okay, cool. I'm going back to writing the game. My Tim, our audio lead and composer, like he can take his foot off the social media gas and instead focus just on what he does best. So just kind of relieving us of the bulk workload. chasing relationships, pitching, having those conversations with, like Lance said, with Unity or with whoever it is, because we were talking to, various platforms and so on, all before this relationship started, or officially got underway with Versus Evil. So it really is just, hey, what do you need? Where can we fill in the gaps? What can we take off your plate? What do you want to do? Like, they also don't overstep. My background is, like I said, was the marketing side and the PR side and doing events and so on. And Versus Evil were really supportive of us at Gamescom, but it was still primarily led by and run by my team. It was great to see Lance there. But it's kind of like, hey, what do you want? We're not going to tell you exactly what you need and what you got to do and when you got to do it. Let's work together. And so there's that collaboration thing. And then, like Lance said as well, it's the additional support. It's the, hey, what else can we do? Like, what's going on? What can we, how can we help you? And sometimes it's not just a tangible thing. Sometimes it's like, hey, so-and-so is having a hard time. Can we just back off on this particular deliverable for this milestone for now? And generally there's a flexibility around that. There's just kind of a human support, the understanding that those pixels come from somewhere, those beeps and explosions and VFX come from somewhere else. Like, there's humans that are putting that together. And just kind of a, no bullshit, no exaggeration, like Versus Evil appreciate the humans behind the video games. And that's, I think that's kind of what Lance was saying about the origins of the publisher and the vision for the publisher, is that it's not the horror story crap that you might have heard about some other publisher developer relations.
Yeah, when the values align, the magic happens. But also, there were definitely challenges, because for the audience out there, currently Craig's in Australia, Lance is in Texas. It's a huge difference. So for Craig, it's like 2 hours past midnight. For Lance, it's like early morning, 7 a.m. And this is, of course, comes with particular set of challenging of managing work throughout the time zones when you barely have any hours overlap. It's mostly like in the end of the day, probably in Texas. So how do you manage that? How do you manage remote work? Is it asynchronous? And what kind of systems or maybe even particular tools you use to track those? Lance, maybe you'll start.
Yeah, so I'll also mention we have a third team doing some work with us called Knights of Unity. And they're actually in Poland. So we have that time zone to factor in as well. I guess the short story is it's a headache. Quite frankly, there's no good time, right? Because someone will always be either middle of the night or early morning or whatever. And that's a hassle. But we make it work. We try to be, cognizant and aware of where people are and what's happening. And if there's a major deliverable, or if there's something that we're waiting on, or if there's an event coming up or whatever, we just try to talk to each other as much as possible. You brought up tools. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that we have at our, disposal right now. Things like Discord and Slack and Jira and all these things, right? They allow us to work when we need to, right? I don't want to say overwork, but certainly you can check in with people like whenever. Like there's certainly been times where I've been awake at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll hit up Craig or Jethro or one of those guys because I know it's better time for them or what have you. There's certain times or certain meetings that I'll want to be a part of, and it may be 4 a.m. for my time, or maybe like it is right now for Craig, it's midnight or 1 a.m. There's exceptions that we can certainly happen, and we all have been part of. The big thing is just be aware of everyone's, kind of what Craig was said. Everyone's a person, right? So we don't want to keep someone up at 3 a.m. every day because it's horrible. It's more so just sharing what you're doing and just talking to people, and not doing it in a way that you're forcing people to work crazy hours or ruin their lives, so to speak, right? So they're up at 3 a.m. They're obviously not sleeping great. They're not working great. It's just a downhill spiral of kind of their mood or what have you. Otherwise, it's certainly a learning experience that's still kind of ongoing. I think it's it is based, a lot of it is communication based, right? Knowing when someone's available and not available, knowing when something's due, not due. But also there's also other things that are fantastic, and some of it is language based or personality based, right? Some people, some cultures are a bit more harsh in how they talk to others, or certainly I know Craig and Jethro both have said words that I have no idea what the hell they meant. That's happened several times. So yeah, just asking questions and talking and being aware of everyone. That's easily both the hardest point and the point that carries the most weight is just, be cognizant of who you're working with and where they're at and what's happening. It's, I like to remind people who work in video games, rarely are there any life or death emergencies or anything crazy like that. So if it can wait for a better time, or over email, over Discord, where you're not bothering them at 4 a.m. their time, well, you're probably okay doing that, unless it is something crazy critical. But yeah, I would say it is challenging, but we're making do, I think, as best we can.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. What's then your set of cases that you can mention, Craig? How did you tackle? Maybe there's like some difference for you as a developer, how you approach this.
Yeah, we started off fully remote from the beginning as well. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. We had artists in China and South Africa. We had people not just in Australia, but in multiple parts of Australia. You can save on labor costs, of course, when you're getting established and you need to, produce assets or get a demo out or get whatever it is. You can't just go, okay, cool, we've got like this huge lump of cash, we're gonna get a physical studio, we're gonna pay rent, we're gonna do all these things. We're rather having a hard look at our finances and going, well, if we don't have a studio, if we're not paying rent, like that's another artist. Or if we don't pay rent, that's like we can get a slightly larger booth at PAX and hopefully attract some more eyeballs when we're trying to attract a publisher, whatever it is. So we've been fully remote from the beginning. Jethro is now based in Australia. He was on the West Coast of USA, so he's in Santa Cruz for the first 2 years maybe of the studio's life. We had people in different parts of Australia, and then we also had, now it's grown to the fact that we've got about 16 people. So we've got people in Spain, South Africa, the UK, 3 different time zones within Australia. We've got 2 different people that happen to be in the same time zone in East Coast USA as well. And then our publisher, they also seem to be fully remote and across 3 different time zones as well. So we just kind of got used to it. It was with the tools that Lance said. We started off with Discord before we moved on to Slack. We just found it a little bit better suited to our needs, but we still communicate with Versus Evil over Discord. We still run our own community on Discord. Yes, we use Jira, Confluence, email. We were so used to all of these things before the pandemic hit that we were lucky from one perspective that we didn't go remote or have to get used to asynchronous remote working. We're kind of like set up in that way already. So yeah, that's really been the main thing is having the tools and then working with people who are conscious of the different time zones. And then as soon as you're able, because for a long time when you're coordinating, you don't have other people to do this for you. You've got a call with somebody in New York, and that's at 7 a.m. and then you've got to run your studio during the day, and then you've got like a couple calls with Europe, and then there's another pitch in the UK, which can be an hour or 2 later than mainland Europe as well. Then the next thing you know, you've done like a 10, 12, 13-hour day as standard. As soon as you're able to step out of that, and we've got a really good producer now based in the UK, we trying to set up a thing where nobody has to work odd hours more than twice a week. So like myself, I'll start at sort of lunchtime on a Monday, and then I'll work until 8, 9 p.m. on a Monday. And then similar on a Thursday, I'll work a little bit later. And then I'll do, say, 2-3 hours on my Saturday morning to overlap with North America. And that just becomes the standard. And everyone, we use our Google calendars. You can see when we're in the office, out the office, and basically just looking at the resources that are out there, and also having a bit of self-discipline and understanding from the team that, hey, there's times when I'm not around. And like Lance said, like what is so important that it can't wait if we're making video games here, not doing anything more, life or death, like you said.
Yeah, that for sure. But as we already discussed, so how the partnership started, how it went, how did you establish kind of a cooperation procedures? Where are you now? What's the next things for the projects, next challenging that you're anticipating? Could you tell us more, Craig?
Cool. Look, we kind of looking at the home stretch now. If we're looking at, we've been doing this for about 4 years. It hasn't been 4 years of flat out development. Like I said, the first while was pre-production, then it was funding, then it was like pitching and trying to find the right partner. So there were long periods where no development was happening, but we've been on a really good run, really good momentum now for quite some time. Like, just looking at the calendar right now, for quite some time, going, wow, it's unreal that this game's actually coming out next year. Where are we? Well, we're closing out the writing, the polishing, the playing everything a million times to make sure we're completely happy with it, sending it off for QA, making sure that the PC version is where we need it to be, and then going on to, I guess Lance can speak more to this because it's his team, but more intensive QA and make sure we're really happy with the state of the PC build, which is being developed with consoles in mind, rather than, okay, PC's good, we're now going into like scramble to port. It's kind of cool. The PC is now at the stage where let's start assessing the console versions and get moving with that. I mean, Lance, what else? What am I forgetting right now for the next little while? I guess we're heads down, getting massive chunks of words over to you to localize into different languages, which is what I mentioned earlier, that Versus Evil's taken care of. That's a really big deal, because you kind of going, okay, well, I'm packaging up this 10,000 word location, which means that if I have a great idea, we've got to draw a line under it, and just say, sorry, that's got to wait for the next game or the next project, or maybe never see the light of day, So, yeah.
Yeah, really curious to hear what you have to say, Lance, as a head of production. What's happening behind the curtain? What's then the challenges? Because you mentioned thinking ahead in the beginning of a relationship. I think now that's that time when everything clicks, when you actually execute on those plans. So what's for you as a publisher comes next?
Yeah, I would say it's the exciting time, and also arguably some of the most challenging times, sadly. Or not sadly, but it's just there's challenges that happen, kind of as Craig mentioned, right? You may have a good idea, but there's not time, or it doesn't fit, or what have you. To Craig's point, and especially with his title and any title like that, right? It's a big narrative-driven branching RPG, and that's where QA comes in. It's where playtesting comes in. So we have months and months of that coming, where we have to figure out, does this feel good? Does it not feel good? Does the combat feel good? Does that not feel good? Does the story make sense? Does it have a good ending? Does the economy work? There's tons of playtesting coming up that will impact the schedule, or could impact the schedule, whether it's good or bad. But personally, I found it to be fun, right? You're playing the game from start to finish and seeing what it feels like, and making tweaks or adjustments based upon that. Overall, as a schedule, we are marching toward release for sometime next year, but there's so many things that could kind of come into play that we have to finish up and work on and adjust, that will still be part of that, whether that is, to Craig's point, just finishing up the PC version, doing technical optimizations, doing localization QA, wrapping up all the specific platform porting. And thankfully, that's where Craig brought up that we're already thinking about consoles. It's not going to be an afterthought. It's kind of more of a inline and progress thing anyway, but there's still plenty of work there that has to be done. So we're still months away, but we are marching toward release. I would say we're in the final quarter of development, which is really awesome. It's where things get hectic, quite frankly. It's the last 20% or so that's can be challenging. It can be hard to finish, but hopefully that's something where we can lean on each other quite a bit and kind of work through all the issues and make it happen. But it's exciting times. I'm excited. Quite frankly, get the game out there, but also just start the marketing plan and see the new art hit hit people's eyes, and see new trailers and stuff. That's quite frankly where I think I'll mention again, the Drop Bear Bytes guys have literally leveled up where the art is just so awesome. It's very cool. I'm excited for people to see it and play it for that matter.
Well, while we still have some time to go, I just remind people in the chat here that you can ask your questions. So anything that you want to know about Broken Roads, Craig and Lance here will be able to answer. Go check it out. It's easy to find the game. There's a beautiful homepage with all the trailers and assets. You can also wishlist it on Steam. Please do that, and you will give a great favor to Craig and his team for all the hard work that they put in. So me personally, and I have a question that been like bothering me since the first time I seen the first trailer. I can't stop but compare this game to Fallout. What's the ambition for the project, or maybe even like the whole franchise? How do you envision this game like in 5 and 10 and 20 years? Do you already thought about that? Or if you can comment on that, of course.
Sure. I mean, what when you set out to make a project, you do think about the greats in the genre, or the, you know, those iconic titles that have come before, either because you know, got your finger to the pulse of the market and you know what's selling and you got to hit those beats, or because there's passion in there and there's memories from those classics from 20 plus years ago, like Fallout, Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, all of those titles that we unashamedly from the beginning were like, that's the vein we want to carry on with. You know, it was probably the second month, 6 weeks into the company, that Jethro and myself were like, cool, we're closing the door on this Oregon Trail with tactical combat in a post-apoc world, and we are going, like, this is going to be a Baldur's Gate 2, Torment, Fallout 1 and 2 inspired traditional isometric role-playing game. For that same audience, we'd seen the success of Pillars of Eternity. That reignited a genre that a lot of people had thought was done. It was obviously just like sleeping for a while for this massive resurgence. And then I know we were about a year into development when Disco Elysium came out and just absolutely showed it's not done at all. Like, there's still so much you can do with this genre, new ideas. You know, the teams are so passionate and so strong. I mean, we've managed to attract writers who worked on the original Planescape Torment, Fallout 2, Torment Tides of Numenera. Our creative lead and our narrative director both worked on Torment Tides of Numenera. Yeah, we've managed to kind of build on this vision, sell the idea, you know, both to the public who are wishlisting the game, to the team who are building it, to the publisher who wants to sign it and sell it. What is this lineage? Well, you can trace it right back to the games you said. You know, Fallout, you can trace it back even further to the Ultima games, if you've ever played those from Origin. And all we can hope is we're doing something really exciting and new and memorable with the moral compass, the fact that it's a very intentionally realistic post-apoc RPG. You know, and what I say with realistic, I want the people in the world to feel like real people. The locations are real. Obviously, in the post-apoc world, there's you know, either a sci-fi or a fantasy, or there's certain things that you lean into, which we're doing, but we're, you know, following the sci-fi rules of, we'll break these rules about, you know, the laws of physics or about whatever it is, and the rest is, we want people to feel like real people, have the emotional reactions that they would have, face the moral quandaries that they do, and have it really like, I just wanted to resonate with somebody in the same way that Baldur's Gate or Planescape Torment did with myself, you know, and have those memories of losing myself in this game as with the original Fallouts. If we can do that, hey, 5, 10, 20, however many years, if we can just do that now, we'll have achieved, you know, everything we set out to do.
Well, I hope this will happen rather sooner than later. And Lance, maybe any comments from you on what's your expectations?
Yeah, I think that's something where, you know, it's a really special game where you can get emotions out of people, right? And you know, not, obviously having fun, that's an emotion, but when you can get other deep kind of personal connections with characters, with story, and then you get actual like human responses from people. Those are things where I think games can stand apart, and you get really good games and they really stand out. And Banner Saga did this, right? You had these really tough choices, and you literally, there's tons of reaction videos out there of people crying playing Banner Saga because they made the wrong choice, or somebody they really loved ended up, spoiler, dying. So that's the thing where I think Craig and the adult writing team has done an amazing job, because there's been several scenarios where, I've read about, and then seeing it in game, it's a whole different thing. And like, oh shit, like some of those moments, it's like writing, reading about it, then seeing it play out on screen in front of you, and you being a part of it, and you making those choices to do certain things or not do certain things. It's a powerful writing, it's powerful gameplay, and it's those kind of things that do stick with people. And I think that's what Craig brought up, those things that last with you, those memories that last with you. They're on a great track, and I'm excited for both the world and the team, because Drop Bear Bytes is a really talented team. So I'm really excited to see what they keep working on and keep developing. But the world itself for Broken Roads is also very unique and very interesting. So there's certainly plenty more to explore there.
And I'm sure you made some memories along the way of developing it, just as personalities within your own, working with the team. Can you share some anecdotes or maybe like funny situation that arisen during development that really is memorable and like you will be remembering? Like problems and challenges, they like keep forgotten. You have in the end a complete game, but there are these heartwarming moments or funny moments that you remember. Can you share some of those with our audience?
Gee, I mean, the thing that comes first to mind is that almost all of us, except a couple that were lucky enough to see each other, say, PAX in 2019 or a few times around Australia, which really hasn't been that much. Most of us have been working apart, going on for 4 years now. Gamescom, which was just 3 months ago, two months ago. That was the first time where most of the team had actually met in person. So we had, I think, 4 people or 5 people that came over from the art team, 3 from South Africa, 1 from Spain. We had 4 or 5 of us from Australia, and Lance came over from the States, and Colin McComb, our creative lead, he came over from East Coast USA. And that was just like, here's these people in the flesh going out, like, let's go have a beer for the first time. Like, let's have dinner let's, see what your dynamic is like in person. It's, you see each other on the screen, and you the other side of a Jira ticket, or you closing out a sprint, all this kind of stuff you get used to. But there's really nothing like seeing someone in person. And while it's worked for us just fine, man, that you get that much more of a connection in person, and hey, get drunk together and laugh together and all those kinds of things. That makes such a big difference. So that's like a real major standout thing. And then also just seeing how, like I said, when we got turned down for state funding the first time, that was going to be a really nice gap to let us breathe for a while we were talking to publishers and so on. It knocked us, but not off our feet, but it knocked us for a few months. And to see how the team were just rallying, like doing other jobs. Okay, tell you what, I'll work for basically minimum wage and an IOU, and if we sign a publisher, give us the money back. And I mentioned Tim, our audio guy, was quite literally mowing lawns to pay the rent, and just how people were like, cool, I think we're onto something here. And yes, it's tough, and we're not knocked down, we're not out by any means. Seeing the dedication there was incredible. And then a personal kind of solo thing, obviously signing a publisher, having an idea, seeing it to go from just Jethro and myself saying, hey, we might go into something here, to like actually signing this and going from 2 guys with an idea to now a team of 16 plus all of the people that are working on this in Poland at Knights of Unity, and in the States and in Brazil with Versus Evil and Red Cerberus. Just like, wow, there's so many people that have dedicated or contributed something to this is sometimes it's a little crazy to think like, wow, just less than 4 years ago, this was an idea chatted about in a pub, quite literally over a beer for the first time, through to, oh man, we're in deep now. we better deliver. Like, there's a lot of people who've contributed to this. So yeah, seeing it come together has been on a personal, side, that's just been the most amazing. I don't even say heartwarming, the most like unreal thing to see it come together.
Yeah, just pursuing this dream for that long and finally seeing coming together. I can't even imagine how good it feels. Just actually to put this to the context, I want to ask Clance, how many pitches do you receive yearly? Because I saw like on Versus Evil page, there's like around 25, 22 signed projects. How many of those didn't get signed? It's like hundreds, thousands.
Yeah, easily in the thousands. I would say on a daily basis, I get anywhere from 10 to 30 pitches. It's a lot. Easily in the thousands for a year, if not more. I mean, there's just a bunch. Then you factor in friend recommendations or traveling to events where we see a couple hundred more pitches, well, what have you. There's a lot. And sadly, just, there's no way we can publish them all. And there's other games and other platforms we just don't work on as much. So we refer people to other friends or other publishers or what have you. But there are a lot of good games out there and a lot of good developers. Sadly, just we're not a huge publisher ourselves. We just can't do more than a handful of games every year. But there's a ton of great games, and great developers out there who need to keep pitching and need to find their publisher, need to find their partner to work with.
Yeah, even after all this time, no matter how tough it looks, you developers out there, never give up, keep pursuing your dream, and it will definitely come true. And okay, so let me just quickly check our chat. I'm reminding you guys again, send us our questions, even if you think it's something outside the topic, we will happily answer. We're here for you, specifically on a DevGAMM Game Fest. So give it a shot, even if it's our favorite taste of the pie. And yeah,
Apple.
so Apple. Well, cheese pie. That would be nice. And so as a closing thought, maybe also some highlights from you, Lance. So how do you usually distribute the time? Because I can imagine even with a handful of projects that you go through publishing each year, how much time do each project receive equal time, or you have like a certain distribution? If the project goes smooth, people just know what they're doing. You just check in occasionally, or how do you do it internally?
So thankfully, Versus Evil's to a point now where we have enough people, we do spread people out kind of evenly. So every developer gets their own brand person, their own kind of marketing person, and their own producer. So like, I know I check in with Craig and Jethro weekly, but we talk often or all the time on Discord and what have you. I do a dedicated kind of weekly check-in. But I think that's the key that I want to bring up is that we're still a small team, and we don't want to overdo it to the point we're not making enough time rather for our developers, right? That's the tricky part with any organization or any partnership, is that it's not fair to Craig and those guys if we sign them up and don't work with them or don't help them or don't, we're not available for them. That's not great. So that's one of the key things we always keep in mind when we're looking at titles and looking at other games, is that, well, we might see a game that wants to launch next year or in January. It's like, well, I don't have anybody available because all my producers are working with people already. So it's not fair to our existing games if we were to do something like that. And that's, unfortunately, that does happen from time to time. So it's just being respectful of both internally of our people's times, but also externally of our developers and how they have access to us. So we don't ever want to get to a point where we're signing so many games we can't actually help and have the right amount of people and time available. So I think that's just the key. Just keep in mind in being respectful of everyone that's involved, whether it's someone's pitching to us or someone we're already working with. It's just making sure that everyone is taken care of, and ideally take care of the people we've already signed before we even think about bringing in another title, making sure we're not upsetting anything that's already existing or the status quo.
But on the both sides actually, and including like the outside staff that you involve, how many people in total it takes to release the game of this scale? Like how many people are gonna be in the credits? Maybe you, Craig, already have like imagining this amounts.
I mean, look, without knowing everyone who's going to contribute on the localization side and the QA side, which is,
So it'll be a lot.
It as I said, may well end up being more than, I guess, from our end. If you think of all of the, sometimes we've had to have a contractor come and do one small thing for a very short time because we needed some help, or we need to get an Aboriginal writer or an elder to help us with some of the Indigenous content in Western Australia, or we need to get like, hey, we're just running shy, we need a writer to do some sort of tonal edits before we ship everything for localization. Just on our side, it's going to be 30 to 40 people. And then when you start to add everyone versus Evil who's contributed, everyone at Knights of Unity, and everyone who I don't think I even know who they are, that met the localization team. Lance can tell me if that's 20, 30, 50, 100 more people that's going to come, and the credits are going to, we have to loop the audio a bunch of times to get for the soundtrack to roll through all those credits. I don't know.
It's going to be a lot. Yeah, more eyes, the better, especially for loc and QA and localization QA. So it's going to be, if not another 100, maybe 150 more people, give or take. It's going to be a lot.
Yeah, this final stretch. Please go on.
Core team of 16 of us, 17, with supported by well over 100 more for the things that we don't think about when you're necessarily playing the game. A lot of people had touched this at somewhere along the way.
Well, I guess that's the beauty of actually game development, when so many people able to collaborate throughout the world to deliver to you experiences that never even existed before the point that people just decided, hey, we're doing this. So with that, we're probably up for the closing thoughts. Thank you again, Lance and Craig. Anything you want to tell to the audience out there watching us real time or in the future in the recording? What would be?
Well, yeah, thanks for tuning in. I mean, you've already said wish listing us on Steam is the most useful thing we can do. That somebody can do. Really happy for the support and really proud of the interest that the game has gotten, and being part of discussions like this and seeing people discover the game for the first time and so on. It's been awesome. So yeah, thanks for the chat. Really cool to be able to talk more about Broken Roads.
Yep, certainly. Big thanks. Awesome to chat, and always happy to talk and chat and involve our developers whenever we can. Please do check out Broken Roads. Look it up on Steam, Google, what have you. It's all over the place. It's got lots of cool stuff. Should be coming very soon. New trailers, new screenshots, all that good stuff.
Yeah, as usual, one of the best ways to track the progress of the project: find the companies on Twitter, find the game on Twitter, subscribe to email newsletter to not miss anything, and
join us on Discord.
Oh yeah, when you can actually talk directly with the developer. We are racing towards the end of the DevGAMM Game Fest. Just 2 hours left until the Game Awards ceremony. And with this, I thank you again for coming to this Fireside chat, and see you in the future.
Thank you.